Well, when was the first time you called an audience member fucky, and how did that
So, I mean, that
how did that
happened,
stick?
I think it probably happened about 20 years ago.
Okay.
I'm not proud of the story of the origination of it. I wasn't probably doing well that I remember. And I was just kind of so frustrated that I just, started talking to the audience member and calling them fucky, and it got laughs. And then it just kind of stuck. And for many years I didn't even do it anymore because I started getting once again frustrated that you can have greatly crafted jokes and work hard on the jokes, but all the crowd remembers is fucky. And it's like,
Yeah.
just call me fucky again, just call me fucky again. Oh, it's great, the fucky thing. It's like, yeah, it is fun. I get it from their perspective, but from a so-called, if you want to call yourself an artist or whatever you want to call yourself, it's not very rewarding to just add a letter to the end of fuck and be known for that.
It's Johnny Late Night! And now here's your host, Johnny Rogers!
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Johnny Rogers Show. This is episode number 87. We got comedian Darren Frost on the show today. I've looked up to Darren for a very long time. He is an absolute killer comedian here in Canada, and I mean, he should be internationally known. I mean, this guy is just incredible. You can watch he has like 7 or 8 specials or something. You can just Google his name and it'll pop right up. And this is a fun episode. It's very comedy heavy, I'll say. We do talk a lot about comedy. I really though wanted to get into anger, because that was Darren's word for the episode, and how he uses anger and that energy on stage and how that's kind of helped him throughout his career. We also take a look at Darren's voice acting work and how he broke into that very competitive world. It's a fantastic episode, absolutely fantastic episode. You're gonna enjoy it. Make sure you leave a comment down below too with your favorite part from the show. As always though, if you want these episodes ad-free, uncensored before anyone else, you got to go to patreon.com/the Johnny Rogers. That's the only way to get it. But ladies and gentlemen, without any further delay, please welcome my friend and yours, comedian Darren Frost. I usually start every episode with a word that the guest provides, the first word that comes to your mind, and it's a kind of a jumping off point, but it also is the label for the episode when it goes up on Instagram. And the idea is that like someone new coming to the podcast, they can find maybe their favorite guest, or they can see a word and be like, oh, I want to hear how they started off of that word.
Okay, well, you can use the word anger. That's a good one.
Anger. Okay.
Yep.
So what made you choose the word anger?
I mean, my whole career has been built on, and life has been built on a certain amount of anger. So I think it's a good word. I think, Johnny Rotten once said, anger is an energy, and I've used it.
Yeah, you definitely use it on stage. There's that, I don't want to say aggressive, but it's like,
Oh, it's aggressive. For sure it's aggressive. Yeah.
I'm sure to some, but it feels like you're very like overly passionate about what the thing, like anger is like the best
Right.
descriptor for it.
Would you let a man massage your back with oil? Would you? No fucking. Would you let a guy? No. And you? No. You guys are fucking pussies. This guy's just got a fucking job to do. He's just got a job to do. Right? He's got strong hands, and guess what happens? The best fucking massage I ever had. It was amazing. He worked out all the fucking kinks. It was great. It was amazing. And then he asked me to flip over.
How did you, like as a performer, how did you find kind of that outlet for your voice, and what made you think like this is how I want to be perceived on stage?
Well, I think every comic goes through a natural kind of flow in their career. In the very beginning, your main objective is to get as many laughs as you possibly can from that audience, and you'll do anything that you have to do to get those laughs. And that normally happens for the first couple of years. You just want to get off like open mic night or amateur night. So, you may not be doing material that you're the most happy about, but it kind of gets laughs. I'm not talking from a stealing perspective, but just like not the most original stuff probably. In the beginning, you're just trying to find your way. And then they always say there's different hurdles, a 5-year, a 10-year. And, by around 6 or 7 years, I started getting a bit of an itchy finger. And, I just kind of changed from kind of what I used to call the happy, clappy, fun boy years of my act to the more kind of aggressive, angry, in your face, passionate, edge, whatever the term, they use every couple of years to describe it. So I made a conscious decision at that point to make a change.
Well, when was the first time you called an audience member fucky, and how did that?
By the way, the whole show you're fucky now, so get into this. Yeah, you know the drill. You're in the front.
So I mean that
how
happened.
Did that stick?
I think it probably happened about 20 years ago.
Okay.
I'm not proud of the story of the origination of it. I wasn't probably doing well that I remember, and I was just kind of so frustrated that I just started talking to the audience member and calling them fucky, and it got laughs, and then it just kind of stuck. And for many years I didn't even do it anymore because I started getting once again frustrated that you can have greatly crafted jokes and work hard on the jokes, but all the crowd remembers is fucky, and it's like, just call me fucky again, just call me fucky again. Oh, it's great, the fucky thing. It's like, yeah, it is fun, I get it from their perspective, but from a so-called, if you want to call yourself an artist or whatever you want to call yourself, it's not very rewarding to just add a letter to the end of fuck and be known for that.
No, most definitely that's not something that you want to I always talk about this too, about with like comedians putting stuff out on the internet. I'm like, be very careful of like what it is you put out, because know that people are going to take that and perceive you as just being that thing, right? Like,
right.
I bet Jim Gaffigan can't walk a block without someone yelling hot pockets at him.
Right.
Or whatever, Dave Chappelle, same thing. People were yelling his quotes out at him too. But now with the accessibility of the internet, you can upload so much more and therefore increase that perceived reception even harder than like a TV show would have naturally.
Yeah, I mean, every young comic for some reason loves to post their first time on stage, and they keep on doing all these clips. I'm like, what are you doing? These clips are embarrassing. You're not doing well. I don't understand what you're doing. So for me, I have a lot of stuff out there. So I can post a clip where I'm not doing great, because it's not always about doing great for me and my style of comedy. Sometimes there is that bit of a like, okay, the crowd's not into this. Where's it going to go? But I'm 32 years in. The first 5 years, I was very conscious of what went out to the world, because you are branded that way. And with the Wayback Machine, I don't know if you even know what that is, nothing can ever leave the internet. You can take something down, but that doesn't mean someone hasn't taken it or there's been an imprint somewhere. So, for example, for me, people constantly ask me, have you thought about quitting stand-up? I think about quitting stand-up every single week, but where am I going to go? You think I'm going to be able to get a job at Costco being a cart wrangler? They put my name in Google and all this stuff pops up. So you have to make conscious decisions about what you're putting out there and what you want out there, because at some point you're gonna have to stand up for yourself based on that and make sure it's something you want to stand up for.
And tell me about the point in your career where you went all in on stand-up, because for a lot of people it's a risk, right? Like thinking, I'm not going to try to hold down, a regular job somewhere, whether it's being a server or, now it's doing Uber Eats. I'm going to do only comedy. I'm going to pay all my bills with comedy. When was that? And like, kind of maybe walk me through that experience for you.
So I'll talk about my experience, but I do want to say something if any young comic is watching this. The biggest lie in show business is to get rid of your day job. It's the biggest con that comics are telling other comics just to self-justify their own ability and where they are in self-hatred. I did not get rid of my day job until it started cutting into the fact I couldn't do as much professional stand-up comedy. Not open mics, professional paid work. So once the one started paying more than the other, or at least to a factor where I could live, then I shit-canned it. And it's very important that you don't do that, because the more time you're in the real world, the more you're going to write. People think I'm going to quit my day job. I got 40 hours now to write comedy. No, you don't. You got 40 hours to piss away now. You're not going to find the same amount of time. You're probably going to write the same amount of time. Now, this is a general rule. There will be some people that are better at it and can actually get themselves in front of a computer for 40 hours a week, and that's great. But the general rule of thumb is it doesn't happen that way. So I've always had a real issue with the comics who are like, you got to quit your day job and go all in. For me, rarely have I gone all in, because I always have some kind of side hustle. Some of these things I broadcast on the internet, and some of these things I don't broadcast on the internet because I don't want to eat hot dogs every day and sleep on the floor. It's show business. The word business is bigger than show. That's an old saying, and it's true. So probably in 95 is when I quit my last day job. So from 95 until now, I've never held a day job. But I've had a lot of side hustles, whether that's cartoon work, movie work, commercial work, working for friends that run events and just being the parking guy for a weekend to pick up some money or to help out a friend out. I've always hustled and done that extra work. So, most years I only make about 30% of my money from stand-up. I love stand-up. It's what I want to do, but stand-up in this country doesn't pay enough to justify the life that I want to live. I have 3 boys. I'm married. I have to pay for a lot of shit. Stand-up comedy in this country is not going to pay for that. Even all the top comics, they generally make their money, for the most part in Canada, with some kind of side hustle, whether they're writing on a TV show or they have a TV show or whatever.
But they're projecting like this is all I do,
Yes,
and I think it's very important that you say that, because that is a big misconception that you have to lose a day job if you want to succeed at comedy. And I was like, comedy is, if you're a headliner, it's 1 hour at night at most. No job is going to be like, unless you're working nights somewhere, but day jobs, 8 to 4. And then you've got several hours before the show even starts, and all these stories, like you said, from there. For me personally, I pursued a line of like YouTube consulting, because I'm like, that's a growing industry. It's something I can do from anywhere, and it's a skill that can actually help my own personal stand-up.
Right.
Similar to, you doing voice acting, it's increasing your awareness to the general public of who you are, right?
Yep. My background is I have a degree in marketing. So that was the whole deal. Like, I wanted to be a stand-up comic. My parents wanted me to have something to fall back on. I said, okay, fine. I'm going to take marketing at business school. And, there's still people that are like, I can't believe he gave that up because he was so good at marketing, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, that was my way of having something to fall back on. And also the number of times that has come in handy for me in this business. Because once people realize I have a degree in marketing or business, all of a sudden they don't think they can rip me off as much. All of a sudden, when I start questioning things, they don't think I'm just a dumb fucking comic.
Yeah.
They know that I mean business. And I've also been accused of taking this business too serious. And I do. I admit that. Some comics are just, let's have some fun or whatever. I'm rarely about the fun. I'm about, this is my life. I've dedicated my life to it. That's my background, marketing, and I'm going to use it. And I have. And I've also had the ability to make decisions on what I'm willing to do. So this new hustle of having a TikTok and this and this and this and branding and all this, I understand it all. But am I going to choose to invest my time into that? Only so much. Energy is a motherfucker in this business, and young comics have it. And, I'm a 52-year-old comic with 3 boys, not boys, but 3 kids. And, there's only so much time I want to dedicate. So I really pick and choose where I put my time. Yeah,
definitely. And it's because you value your time, right? And you have other ways that you can, like you said, side hustle gigs that you can get value from. I don't know if you remember this, but like a long time ago, probably like 2017 or something, I had opened for you in Ottawa. Mike McDonald came into the green room. It was at the old Yuck Yucks Club. And I still remember that conversation that you were having, where you were telling us, like, you can't just do comedy. Like, if you did every single one of the festivals, it only pays this amount. Like, you can't live off of that. And that's the hardest part about Canadian comedy. But
I remember that conversation. At that time, if you did every festival, you'd make maybe 15, maybe 20 grand. And no comic does all the festivals every single year. So as comics, go online and go, look at me, I'm so great, I'm doing this. That's cool and everything. But at the same time, when you look at the finance behind it and all that, it doesn't really add up. It's just a circle jerk and a hand job for your Facebook friends at the end of the day. These things are important, don't get me wrong, but they're not as big as the projection of it is. And what everyone wants to be like, oh, I'm having such a great time. That's cool. I'm making the same money in a small town in Northern Ontario on one Friday night than I would a whole weekend there. There's something wrong with the business when that's the actual economics of it.
Yeah. And it's hard too, because I mean, I was talking to Dave Yates, who's he was from Chicago and then he moved to LA and he's been doing comedy for a little while. And he was saying we were talking about unions, comedian unions, and he's like, there can never be a union, no matter how much people want to bring it together, because there's always some guy who's willing to do the spot for a beer or
Yes.
$5.
Yes.
And it's like, you can't really have a union when there's that type of person who's willing to just take those low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always about where's all the money going.
Mm-hmm.
Every single show I do, I'm doing a head count. I'm doing a door. What's the door? Where's all that money going? And then I choose whether I go back to that place or not. You know, if it's for a charity, there's exceptions to everything. But for the most part, when there's all paying $20 at the door to get into this comedy show, and there's 150 people, that's $3,000. And you want to pay me $200 to headline, there's something fucking wrong with this equation. And the quicker that comics start going, I'm worth a certain amount of money, the better off you'll be. And you have to be willing to say no. And you have to be willing to say, look, that's not my bag. Maybe, good luck. Maybe I can help you find someone. I'm not going to find someone for someone that's, making $3,000 at the door and wants to pay $300 for a headliner. It ain't happening. That's a big, big problem in the last 5 years. Is this whole idea that, we're all doing our own shows now, but where's all the money going?
And you have to it was the same thing. It's funny because before I did comedy, I was like trying to get into the professional wrestling business and just didn't realize yet that I wanted to be an entertainer. I wasn't really so interested in getting my ass kicked every week part of it. But there was the same thing in that business where there would be these independent producers. And they didn't care about the wrestlers themselves. They're paying them next to nothing. They were doing it as a sort of like a get rich quick scheme, I guess, in a way. And you can see that even it's just another problem with the independent producing field is there's no guideline saying comedy shows should cost this much, given that the headliner is this experience. You know what I mean? There's no cross-reference table.
And that's the thing. People will say to me, well, Darren, you don't know. Listen, I've ran everything. I've run a festival. I've run for 5 years. I did a festival. I've run hundreds, if not 1,000 shows where I booked a theater and paid people and done it all. And I'm always the kind of person that is I sit down with a headliner at the end of the show and go, this is how much money came in on this show. And this is how much money you are getting. And this is how much money I am getting. And I guarantee you, almost every person that's worked for me has went at the end, Darren, you probably should take a little more because I'm like, no, this is what I think. If you're headlining the show, you deserve to get. I'll be fine. I'll just do more shows and it'll all add up. But this whole idea of working for so little money because, it's, exposure or the other con or lie that they have. And nobody really cares. Nobody cares about you or works as hard as you do.
And I want to talk about another, not con or lie, but could be, a myth that gets sort of circulated in the comedy world is this idea that you're supposed to do as many mics as you possibly can. And do you think at a certain point that overloading yourself with just comedy starts to have diminishing returns on your material because you're beginning to write jokes to make comedians laugh? Because that's who, aside from you're saying the day job where you're having a shitty customer that day and that forms, a more long form bit about customer service.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I say the day job is important because you're in the real world. What happens is when you start becoming a comic and you start going to 8 or 10 or 15 open mics in a week, your whole life becomes comedy. You stop calling your friends that you made in high school or university or whatever, and your whole life becomes comedy, comedy, comedy. And then you only have comedy, comedy, comedy experiences. And then you can't write any jokes other than the other 10 comics that you're around to make them laugh. And life experience produces quality material. And if you have real life experiences that are outside the comedy world, that's going to lead to only a better show. And a lot of comics, they're 10, 15 years in, and I'll say to them, when is the last time you went out with your high school buddies or whatever, or the, it doesn't mean high school, but just friends of yours. And they're like, I don't remember. It's a bit of a trap.
Yeah.
And this grinding culture, grinding is important. I think in the beginning you got to grind, find your way a little bit, but there is a wall or a ceiling that it's like you hit it, and then it's like, I'm not getting better.
Yes.
I've made my friend networks. I've introduced myself to enough people. I have enough comics that I can call and ask, as friends. Now I've got to focus on the quality of the show. And so, like, for me, even, like, I used to live in downtown Toronto. The last 5 years of downtown Toronto, there's only 2 or 3 open mics I would go to because, for the most part, they weren't quality shows. Just making some drunk fuck laugh on a Tuesday night at some shitty bar is not going to make a Saturday night crowd laugh.
No.
You're actually working against yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And there's something I teach in my class as well about, because I sometimes run a class, and I always say that energy is useless. And people go, wow, that's weird for you to say. But what I do is I always go to an open mic and I run the jokes first without any kind of real energy. And if they get laughs, then I know they're funny. And then I can put them through the aggressive filter and the energy filter, but they're funny first. You have to find places that can give you a real gauge on if your material is funny or not. And if you're just playing these tiny, like in New York City, these bringer shows to 8 people, and you're grinding it out, I don't know how good of a gauge that is. And I don't know if you hit a ceiling and then you got to start saying, maybe I got to put on my own shows and, like, do my own tours. There's other things you can do with your time.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking right now too, about, like, because I moved to Ottawa, and there's shows, but there's, the open mics, and then there's some book shows. But I keep thinking, like, how am I supposed to, work on getting my hour if there's not really any 10 or 20-minute spots available in the city? And that's kind of where producing your own stuff starts to come in, right?
Yes.
Hosting and doing 15 off the top, and then minutes in between.
And I mean, there's all these open mics now that also have, like, almost like a closing spot that they'll do 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And that's good because then it gives you a bit more of a sea leg. I love it how people say I'm headlining. I mean, okay, like, to me, the term headliner,
you're going last on the show.
You're going last. And, come see me headline this show that you don't have to pay to get into. The term headliner, there's a lot of dirty words in comedy. Headliner, great, genius. There's so many genius comics in this business. No, there isn't. There's only a few. There's so many comics that think they can do an hour. I could probably name you only like 6 in Canada of the whole people that are working right now that should be doing anywhere near an hour. Just because you can talk for an hour doesn't mean you should be doing comedy for an hour. There's a reason that headliners at comedy clubs are 45 minutes. There's a bit of a break that the crowd can only handle a certain amount. An hour is a different level. It's not just 15 more minutes. But these are all things you only figure out once you're doing the 45 and you're like, oh, I've got to do an hour tonight because something happened. And then you realize I don't have an hour.
Yeah. Mark Anthony Synagoga was mentioning that on the last episode about how you could string together all your 10-minute sets and it equals an hour. And you're like, I have an hour of jokes. He goes, it's a different animal being on stage and talking for an hour. It's like a different part of your brain almost that you have to adjust to. But how do you find, like, because with your high energy, does it take a lot out of you pushing that hour of, like, keeping that energy, or do you give yourself kind of waves of emotion to?
Yeah, there's highs and lows. If you look at someone like Jeremy Hotz, right, originally from Ottawa, he's a perfect example. If you see Jeremy in 6 minutes, he doesn't let the audience catch a breath. Yeah. And it's like 6 minutes of, like, a laughter that you'll never see anyone else get in 6 minutes. And then he leaves the stage and he's done. But when you see Jeremy headline, there's no way that you can keep that kind of energy going for an hour. A crowd will burn out. I'm telling you, they'll burn out. So even someone like a Jeremy has highs and lows in their show. And just like I do, there's moments where I'm kind of whispering things and a lower energy, and then I ramp up, and then I do, it's no different than a band when they do 90 minutes. Here's a ballad. We have to do a ballad because we all have to kind of slow down.
You sing this one.
Because there's only so much you can do. Like, I can stream for 90 minutes and I can jump around for 90 minutes, but that doesn't mean the audience.
They're not going to want that. Yeah, of course.
In a row. So, I mean, I just did Winnipeg and I did 2 one-hour shows on a Saturday night, and I was jumping around a lot, but there's still quiet moments in there. There are still moments to breathe, and you got to give them that little bit of a time.
And pacing yourself there too.
Mm-hmm.
I know because you do voiceover work. Voiceover is notoriously like a very difficult industry to break into.
Yes, yes.
How did you discover that you had that kind of, or was it somebody else that saw something in you and offered you a role, or were you very much always like, I can do this and pushing towards that?
So I did stand up first, and then that led to me doing a bunch of commercial work. And I had a really big run in the commercial world because comics are good at commercials because you have to be funny in 30 seconds and less. And comics are easy. I can be funny in 8 seconds. And that's why you see a lot of comics being spokespeople for commercials or brands and that kind of thing, because they know what they're doing. So
we should do a separate clip of you being funny in 8 seconds.
Well, we could do that.
Just like cut this.
Yeah.
And then...
yeah.
I'll cut it in. I'll cut it in after the conversation.
You know, you're from a dysfunctional family when you start to lose track of who touched who. But so what happened is I started doing well there. Then my agent's like, you know, you have a unique voice, and I got told that a lot. So I started doing like kind of voiceovers for like radio commercials. And then there was someone that was teaching a class, and my agent, you know, in the beginning, they want you to take classes to, you know, get better. So I took a class for voiceovers for radio, and the person running the session was a director, and I went in to read once, and she just stopped me because it was like a Levi's sexy commercial, like, oh, you want to look good in your jeans, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And she just said, stop, don't take this the wrong way. You're never going to be this. Your voice is not this. Your voice is perfect for cartoons. So for the rest of the weekend, that class, everyone else worked on, you know, the Dentine gum voiceover commercial. I did cartoons. 2 weeks later, because she's a casting director, she brought me in, and I started auditioning. And like within a month, I booked my first cartoon, and that was like 20 years ago, and I've been going strong ever since.
Wow,
that's amazing. But it is a hard thing, mainly because, like, so there's like maybe 10 people in Toronto that are working all the time, and they do hundreds of voiceovers and voices and all this cartoons and that. The problem is they're that good. They're very, very good. So it's just human nature why it's so hard to get in. If I own a brand, why would I take a risk on bringing Darren Frost in when I've worked with this guy named Harry 500 times and he nails it every time? And I heard his audition, and it's amazing. I'm going to go where it's good. And I've been in the room with these other people, and they are that good. There's very little nepotism in voiceover. You only get it because you have a good audition.
It's like a meritocracy, right? Like it's like, they've been at it for a while, and they've shown that they do great work.
And they nail it every time.
Yeah.
And, you know, in the voice world, especially in certain parts of it, time is a big factor. They don't have a lot of time to nail some of this shit down. So they're like, okay, I know this person can do it well. Now, for me, I generally do 3 or 4 kind of character types in cartoons. They're not main roles for the most part on a cartoon. They're always a side player. And so the big dogs are chasing the leads. I don't want to be a lead.
Yeah,
I don't want that pressure. You know what I want? You know, not to get too businessy, but in the voiceover world, for the most part, if you say 6 or more lines, that's the same money that if you're the lead. So wait, I can go in that room for 8 minutes and get the same money that someone's in there for 2 or 3 hours being a lead on something. My ego says, oh, you're not the lead, but you want the money? Yes.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm lucky that no one's doing those like they can do those roles, but when the breakdown comes out and there's 10 characters, no one's going for, you know, the bully. They're going for the lead guy or the lead girl.
Yeah.
No one's going for the little nerd that's only got a couple lines.
Okay, everyone, hold on to your sippy cups and prepare to be dazzled.
This is true. So you found that kind of like market that you can capitalize on, and then
you know what I've always been good at. I have a little niche. That's my hit. Work that angle, and that's what's going to make you stay in this business. And whether it's the way I've branded my stand-up, being the angry kind of troll and the confrontational or controversial, that's kept me. If I was in America with the same experience and TV work and film work and all this, I'd be playing like theaters easily. But in Canada, it's a harder sell because Canada, especially the media, runs away from controversy. They don't embrace it. So if you're controversial here, good luck getting on the CBC.
Yeah, right. Because they just don't want to like back that or represent that. Whereas in America, it feels like, well, in Canada, we don't have, a lot of people think we have freedom of speech, but we don't actually have freedom of speech at all. We just compare ourselves to America in that way, and we don't have that. Whereas there, they, prioritize that over everything else. And therefore you can see different subsects of comedy even start to evolve and grow. Do you think it's ever going to change in Canada?
I don't think so personally. No. I think as long as the traditional media and it's dying off, the internet's definitely helping. I mean, I know for a fact that one of the, I think it's the first year that one of the festivals who used to have very strict rules on language now are like, well, you can say a couple F-bombs. It's okay now because the it's loosening a bit. So in that regard, yeah, it might get a little better.
Okay. So as we stray further from God, it gets better.
and as streaming takes over, that has no rules, these other places have to go, we have to adapt here because stand-up comedy that's restricted is not fun.
It's not good.
Now, what does that mean? Watching me try to be clean is nowhere near as fun as watching me do my normal act. But if I was a clean comic, then it's that's fine. But there's not enough clean comics that are good.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Country.
There's people trying to be clean so that they can get the opportunities. And then there's people who genuinely are just that way. They just don't. Like, I remember I took a comedy class when I was like 3 years into comedy because I was like, I don't know everything. I'm 3 years in. And I remember like, the whole idea is you write 5 minutes, and I was like, cool, I get to write a new 5 minutes. And I remember one of the other classmates said, it's strange hearing swear words come out of your mouth. And I was like, I never perceived myself that way. But I guess somebody looking at me, they're like, oh, this little boy next door, you know what I mean? Like I couldn't imagine him swearing. So that even is something that you have to take into account as a comedian, is how you're being looked at and how you're being perceived.
Oh, the first 30 seconds, that audience has already made that decision.
Exactly.
It's 30 seconds. They've already made that decision. More than half the crowd is already probably like, I think I might like this guy, or I think I might not. You can always sway it or change it, but I'm telling you right now, like as soon as I get on stage, people have already formed an opinion. I know that. And I'm not going to fight it. You have to accept it. There is a comic, I'm not going to say his name. Normally I name names, but I'll just leave it out. He's a clean cut looking guy, and he comes across on stage like an aw shucks, right? And he was trying to talk about the truth and be a little dirtier. And I had to say to him, I go, look, the crowd isn't buying it. I'm not saying change. I'm saying you should at least acknowledge the fact that it's going to be a harder sell for you doing this kind of material. Because they look at you and they see like such a clean cut guy. And when you talk about these things, your jokes better be so fucking funny outside of that for them to be willing to go there, or it's going to be a bit of a longer road for you.
Yeah.
And I also think sometimes, it seemed to be cool to be edgy or dark. And a lot of people that aren't degenerates or like dark people start doing this kind of material just to be, cool with their friends. And it's like, your friends aren't always going to be there. Sometimes you're going to be in Saskatchewan in a population of 800 people. Yeah. And they're yelling at you and you hate yourself. And
dude, well, you got a fucking bottle thrown at you.
Right.
People talk about like that happened recently. That girl who had a bottle thrown and hit the wall. Yeah. I'm like, Darren Frost had it hit him right in the fucking chest.
Right in the chest. I know.
Like,
folks, sometimes comics have to go on the road and perform for monkeys, right? Moose Jaw, 2001. End of joke.
Do the monkey.
I don't think you've watched the show so far. This is no choose your own adventure story. If you can turn to page 85, it turns out I fucked your mother. And you don't want to know what she whispered in my ear. Oh!
If
Like,
that video came out now, it'd be massive.
oh, massive. You should repost it if anything.
Well,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like clip it up.
Mm.
Send it out.
Yeah.
But like what is it like to have like some adverse, knowing that you're gonna have some adverse reactions to your stand-up, maybe, right? And then something like literally physical happening to you. Like what went through your mind when that happened in that instant?
Well, I mean, I'm someone in Canada that for the last 15 or 20 years has been a lot about branding.
Mhm.
So I don't like to punk audiences. So I force a lot of comedy clubs to use the term X-rated. I don't like the term X-rated. I don't like it. But what it does, it at least stops people and lets them think for a second, is this going to be for me? Because I don't want you coming in there, and I always say this on stage, you don't hire Metallica to sing Adele songs.
True.
Right? If you're going to go see Metallica, you want Metallica songs. So that's why I put warnings on shows, because it's very important that people know this isn't Seinfeld with F-bombs. So on that show in particular, there were warnings up that said X-rated, no refunds. There is a chance you will be offended. There are all signs on the way in. And everyone went through those doors or those steps to get into the venue. Then it's on you.
Yeah, you accepted the terms at that point.
You have accepted.
Yeah.
You know, and if you don't like me doing my 9/11 material or whatever material I'm doing, I don't know what else I can do for you. You know, we live in a world that everyone has a little fucking Google box in their hand. You can easily put my name in Google and watch 2 or 3 clips before you go and buy 5 tickets.
Yes.
It's not my fault that you didn't do the research. So that's what generally happens a lot of times, that people don't do the research. And then what do? I just do what I do. Now, sometimes I can ease into it a little more or play a little nicer, but I'm finding I'm having to play nice a little too much in the last couple months.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm not a big fan of it, but I also understand it's a business.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's also important. It highlights the importance of theming comedy shows, because I think comedy is one of the only arts where when you come into a show, you're getting like 5 or 6 or 7 different genres of comedian, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
you'd never go to a concert and hear Metallica and then hear Adele and then hear, you know, John Mayer play after that. Like it just wouldn't happen.
Well,
like,
actually, that's the thing. In Europe, they do have these festivals where that actually happens. And there's a famous clip of Nickelback being rocked, like a rock's thrown at them, and Chad gets it in the head. Because I'm not sure if they had just followed Slipknot or Slipknot was next. And, you know, being someone that's been attacked and had things thrown in it, it's a fucking horrible, horrible thing to have happen, because it's happened more than once to me. And there's always that fear. Like, I used to be the heckler killer and all this, you know, Steve Hofstetter, I'm the heckler killer. Oh, I never branded myself that way because I don't want them there.
Yeah, you don't want them yelling out throughout the show.
Like,
it's just,
I have jokes. Every minute I'm dealing with this douchebag is one less joke I get to do.
Exactly.
Now, if I'm not working on anything and I'm just fucking around, fine, I'll do it. But do you think I was a 12-year-old boy dreaming of being a stand-up comic so I can make fun of someone in fucking Moose Jaw on a Friday night? There's no art there. There's no fucking art there. And so I'm good at it. But so what? You know,
that's not going to air on, you know, late night. Like, you're not going to be like doing whatever Conan and do your heckler destroying set.
Right. These videos, this guy gets destroyed, and I watch it and I'm like, I mean, it was okay, but
yeah.
And that's got 80 million views. All right, fine.
Yeah.
That's
like what happened in, I think, did you see the Woodstock 99 documentary? That was kind of what happened too, where they had like a different band coming in afterwards, and it just caused like a whole riot because like the show wouldn't start or whatever. It's just
Limp Bizkit went on, and then Red Hot Chili Peppers went on and purposely did the fire song to agitate it all. And An audience is I hate to be so artsy fartsy, but it is almost like a living organism when they get to a certain size.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've played to 200-300 people packed in, and there is this kind of like wave momentum that you have to try to control, because at any moment it could slide off and 10-20 people aren't going to be happy, and then they start heckling, and then the whole fucking show's off the grid. It happens.
What's like a like your favorite piece of advice that you've heard from like maybe a comedian that you look up to, or like someone that, it doesn't even have to be a comedian, just someone that you look up to as a mentor?
I know that most comics from the generation before me, most of the advice that they gave me, and it still is true, is that two things. One was be clean. And I literally do tell comics to, even if you're a degenerate and dirty, always write clean jokes. It's still an exercise. That doesn't mean you have to use them, but always having an 8-minute clean set in your back pocket is always going to help you out. Doesn't mean you have to concentrate on it, but I can do 45 minutes of clean, because over the years I've written clean jokes and cute jokes or whatever. So I still have that. But the most important piece of advice I've ever been given is don't wait for the phone to ring. You don't wait. Don't wait for anyone. Don't wait for a comedy club to tell you what to do. Don't wait for a booker to tell you what to do. You just do what you want to do, within reason, of course. Don't be a dick. There'll be lots of time for you to be a dick later on in your career. But when you're young, just try to have as much fun as you can, and don't wait for the phone to ring.
That's a great piece of advice. And now with your kids like getting older, have you shown them your stand-up yet? Do they have like an opinion on it? Do they do something and then they say like, please don't put that in your act? Like, are they conscious of it?
So I have 3 boys, 20, 16, and 13. The 20-year-old only just saw me live for the first time 4 months ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They have seen a few little clips online. They don't enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's not their thing.
Because you're dad, right? like
Right. And no dad's cool.
No.
It's like Dave, the Foo Fighters. My kids don't care what I do,
Yeah.
And there's a lot of truth to that. Do they like what I do? Sure. Are they running around screaming from the rooftops? No. Have they ever said don't put that in your act? No. Is there things that they're going to watch when they get older and it's about them? Yeah, it is. And I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. I've said a lot of horrible things, but in the idea of comedy and the venue, it was the right thing to do at the time.
Yeah. All right. I just always think about that when it comes to like comedians who are growing families, and like because every time I write a joke about my parents, I go, I hope they don't hear this, but whatever, like I'd rather get the laugh first and then explain it to them later, right? And especially if it's good, that's the whole point. I remember reading Judy Carter's comedy Bible.
Yes.
And she says in it, like, everybody's fair game. Like when it comes to your material, like don't take a hesitation in like including somebody in your act. It's just a part of being a comedian.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another piece of advice that I think is important too is, and I've heard this a couple times in the last 6 months of either watching other comics speak, and I think it's important is, if you're going to take the good compliments, you got to also take the bad. You can't just always be like, oh, pat it on the back.
Mm-hmm.
If someone's being critical of you, you sometimes have to stop, look at it, think it through, and then adjust. Because I have 7 or it's debatable 8 different specials, and that's over 20 years.
I still got it here.
Yeah, and exactly. And there are clips that I listen to now where I just shudder. I'm like, I can't believe I fucking actually said that on stage. Not only said that,
recorded
but I
it,
thought
put
it
it
was
out.
good enough to put on a DVD.
Yeah. Do you have something at the top of your mind that
it's
like
a horror?
makes you cringe?
There's one riff on My Better Left Unsaid that I'm talking about cancer, and it's really, really harsh. I'm not saying it wasn't funny, and I wasn't. I still stand behind it, but I'm like, would I do that bit now? No, I wouldn't. But I still stand behind everything I've ever put out.
Yeah,
do I
but
like the fact I've said certain words, like the R word? I'm not a fan of that word anymore. I don't say it anymore. But 15 years ago, I did, And I regret that. And I apologize to anyone when they call me on it. And I just don't choose to use that word anymore. I think it's important that, I'm a comic that believes in safe spaces. I'm one of the few kind of edgy comics that believes in it, because I think if a crowd wants to go somewhere and wants safe jokes and doesn't want to be triggered, they should have that venue.
Yeah.
My only problem is the people running those venues should not be coming to my venue
Sure. Yeah.
and judging and complaining about my venue.
Both can coexist.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's the theming of shows, like I was saying. Yeah.
Right. For every Darren Frost, there has to be a Carrot Top, and for every Carrot Top, there has to be, a Kinnison, and for what I mean. It's like, I love magicians. I go see them all the time, and hypnotists, all that stuff, and it makes the world go round. It makes it interesting.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Like, I think so many people were pushing back against political correctness instead of looking at it as like a new chance to evolve your comedy. It's like you're getting mad because someone changed the difficulty on the game. You like playing it on easy mode, and now it's on hard mode. And I will still fight for the right to do it. Sure. Don't get me wrong. I will still fight for the right for a comic to say anything they want on stage. And I think it should be a safe space in that regard. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there isn't freedom of consequence. Mm-hmm. So you got to choose which hill you're willing to die on. Yeah. That's how I kind of look at it. And there's certain hills I'm just like, nope. Yeah. Not dying there. I think it gives comedians a chance to be more clever with their material, though, like still saying anything that you want to say. But like now you have this whole new cultural aspect that everyone's aware of that you can kind of play with. Especially comedy is like Mr. X, right? So like you could be pandering to this thing and then make them laugh in a new way, Right. The only problem with the clever argument, and I don't disagree with you, is that a lot of times dirty comics are just are sold this kind of bill of goods. Oh, you have to be dirty because you can't be clever. Oh, no, I don't think that, yeah. No, but I'm just saying that is an argument between clean comics and dirty ones, right? Clean comics are like, I'm smart. Dirty comics just say suck and fuck and they get laughs. Sure, well, you know what? There's lame clean comics and there's lame dirty comics, and there's easy clean comics and easy dirty comics. And there's a level of clever to both of it. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I agree with you that sometimes they're going the easy route because it's getting laughs in these places. Yeah. Do I want them as fans? No, I don't. But sometimes you don't get to choose your fans. And so you got to make a decision of what you're willing to put out there and what you're willing to do. And if you're going to fall on the sword, you're going to have to fall on that sword. And that's the thing too with like all, we're talking about all these comedians putting out clips. I'm of the thought process of like, you're kind of selling them on like a dream that doesn't exist. Right. Because like, let's say you post this, you're 3 years into stand-up and you post a clip from one of your shows and it gets 1 million hits. It's a viral success. Yeah. What do you have to give them? Do you have an hour comedy special that they can now go watch or buy? Do you have merch? Do you have a tour coming up that they can get tickets to? Because if not, they kind of laugh at it and then they scroll to the next thing. Yeah. And we're getting too locked in on the numbers and not locked in on improving the art itself. Right. Or what happens is, so there's a comic named Greg Morton. I don't know if you know who Greg Morton is. Yes. Yeah. So Greg Morton's dilemma, great guy, amazing comic. So he goes on America's Got Talent and he does a whole bunch of voices and impressions. And then I did a tour I put together with a partner of theaters in Canada. And we did well, but some of the blowback was people didn't want to go and see him for an hour to do those voices. Well, the problem is Greg doesn't just do voices. He's a killer headliner stand-up comic, like a killer. And he just peppers in voices every once in a while to raise the stakes. Like, is his closer some voices? Yes, it is. Is the opener? Yes, it is. But there's a lot in there that's more than just that. But that's the problem, that it's almost like a hair shirt, that if you put out the voices and America's Got Talent, that's what you're seen as. That's what people are expecting. So I bet there's lots of people that go see him thinking it's just going to be an hour of that. And then they see some stellar stand-up and they're like, we never knew Yes. Yeah.
that you could actually do stand-up comedy at this level.
But
And Greg was killing.
He would have lost that. He would have lost that audience though if you didn't have that material to back himself up with, right? Like,
right.
I think it was Liza Shlesinger. I always have such a hard time saying her last name, but when she won Last Comic Standing, she was like a fairly new comedian. And now she has like this huge fan base, and they want to set up a tour for her where she's going to have to do 45 to an hour.
Absolutely.
And she's been doing comedy for like a couple of years. It's like now you're pressure cooking your jokes and not giving them, enough time to fully get it out. When did you decide?
Just 1 second. Just to add to that,
go ahead.
Another great example of that is Margaret Cho. So when Margaret Cho first came on the scene, I'm not sure if she won Star Search or she won something, and she got really big really quickly. She had her own sitcom about her Asian heritage and background and family. Wow. And then she did these tours of comedy clubs as a headliner, and she didn't have headlining time, and she did not do well. And she had to go back to LA and do a whole bunch of the open mic scenes in the alt rooms and build up her, herself back up to now where, Margaret Cho is probably one of the best comics, definitely of her style that ever did it. But it kind of never happened for her. She could have just got too depressed and said, fuck it, I'm not going to keep doing this because I've already blown my wad. All these people saw me not do well or as great as I wanted to. You got to be very careful because 45 minutes to an hour is a long time. And there's ways around it. You can have Q&As and, this is how they kind of do that now. But Eliza, I haven't seen much of her live, but, she's a really good comic. But that's a situation I wouldn't want to be in.
No, that's what I was thinking too. When did you decide to record your first hour? Like as a comic, what was that kind of moment where you're like, I've headlined, were you headlining weekends at clubs?
Yeah,
and
I was.
You were kind of like, you had the hour tight under your belt, right?
So this is really petty. So, and I think it was 2004, 2005, a comic I despise and I think is terrible put out an album. And my attitude was, my worst show is better than that comic's best show. I'm admitting it. It's petty.
Yeah.
And so I put out an album, and that was It's All Going Down From Here, which got some, strong reviews and things. And it did well at shows. And then I just started going, like, all the comics that I kind of looked up to had specials. It wasn't just one. Like, George Carlin had a whole career on a shelf. Yeah. Right? 15 specials. Every, you can look at it and you'll know that was from 89 because of my hair and what jokes I was doing and talking about. And it's almost like your life. Yeah. And that's when I decided to start doing that. It's like, I'm going to start documenting. So when people are like, oh my God, Louis C.K.'s been doing this every 2 years, a new special. George Carlin did it before him. Lots of other comics. I'm not saying that's Louis's fault. That's not his fault. He just did what he did.
He's following the trend of what great comics have done.
Yeah, commented on it. Yeah. But I started doing it, and I started putting out an album or a special almost every 2 years. Now, since 2013 or 14, I've slowed down tremendously. Obviously, the pandemic was in there as well, and a few other things. But now I'm kind of on the back end of probably writing another special and getting another one out there. But there is this idea of, what do I really want to talk about? I've got 6, 8 specials, whatever, some overlapping material, but that's a lot of material out there already. Now I'm a lot more pickier on what I want on a special because it's going to be out there forever.
Do you worry about like doing an impression of yourself? Like, do you notice like when you write a comedy bit that you're like, oh, this is the same kind of beats as like an older bit that I have? And
of course it is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why I stopped watching Louis C.K. well before the controversy. Once I figured out Louis C.K.'s rhythm, it kind of died for me. And once he would start something, I'm like, I bet he's going to go here. And it goes there.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a wordsmith. I'm not saying I could write anything like him, but once I could see where it was going, it kind of died for me, And the same thing, I have to catch myself because I know my own tricks. Yeah. So I have to be very conscious of like, oh, I know I did that on my earlier special, and this is just the same thing. So I am conscious of it, and I try not to do it. And that's another reason why, like, I put out a special in 2013. I put one out in 2020. and something in 2017 in between there with Kenny Robinson, a Rank and Vile album. So that's one of the reasons it's slowed down. I don't want to repeat myself, and you have to be careful of the tricks that you're doing.
Yeah, no, of course. And then something that I always ask every guest towards the end of the podcast is if you can make a phone call to 15-year-old Darren and give him a piece of advice based on what you know now, knowing that it won't affect your current timeline. So anything you say to him doesn't change your life whatsoever.
Right.
What would you say?
Well, it's going to seem hypocritical as what I said off the top of this, but I'd say, especially in the first 10 years, don't take it so serious. And when you go to a town, get up at 8 o'clock in the morning and walk the fuck around.
Do you find that important to really take in the city that you're in to relate better to the audiences?
Well, it's not always about relating better. First of all, you can write a joke. Okay, that's cool, whatever. I mean, I wrote a couple minutes about Winnipeg. I was there last weekend, which really killed and worked out for me. But, mental health is so important now, of the conscious of reality of everyone. And you'll find your mental health is a lot better if you're not just sitting in a hotel room all day long. I don't self-medicate. I don't do any drugs. I don't really drink very much. I mean, that's a big plus for me. So I am able to kind of get up earlier and do these things. But, if you're going to spend 4 days in Calgary, go check out some things, do more of it. I did a little bit of it. I just wish I did more.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. For people that want to check you out, they can go to darrenfrost.com. That's where you'll list like your upcoming show dates.
Yep.
At Comedy Whore on Instagram and same thing on Twitter.
Yeah.
But at official Darren Frost on TikTok.
Yes.
And check out your comedy special 2020 Story Yelling Live from Toronto. That's on your YouTube page. All these links are always...
The whole thing is free. My last special I put on the whole thing. It's 50 minutes. I put it out because I taped it in January and the world shut down in March. I'm like,
good time to tape a special. Yeah.
I can't tour this. I mean, I wouldn't even, it's only a one camera. I was only going to do the audio originally, but then I'm like, fuck, might as well put it on YouTube. People can watch it.
Yeah, no, yeah. Go check that out, everybody. I'll put all those links down in the description below. Make sure you stick around for next week. We have Mike Wilmot coming on the show. If you want these episodes ad-free and exclusive before anyone else, you got to go to patreon.com/The Johnny Rogers. But for now, it's been Darren Frost. I've been Johnny Rogers. I'll see you on the next one.
You've been listening to The Johnny Rogers Show. New episodes air every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.